Thinking is a skill. It takes practice. Socrates said, "The only thing I know is that I know nothing." There are other sayings in relation to this about someone with certainty and what a handicap it is to feel so certain about your perspective. Speaking with Christians, sometimes I get this notion that a Christian is he's like the guy who says Corvettes are the best. The best car in the world is a Corvette. Oh, really? Okay. Have you ever driven another performance car? No, I never would. I would never drive another sports car. Corvettes are the best in the world. Okay, you've just proven your statement completely invalid. How can you say it's the best if you've never experienced anything else? So there's a lot of that kind of thing with Christianity. I'm not going to pick on Christianity today. I do that too much, too often. But I will say this whole practice of logic and thinking and reason, when you get into the field of religious study, theology, comparative religion, these are people highly skilled in logic, okay? So there's this interesting thing from the Bible. You've heard of the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Well, who the hell put them in that order? Because apparently, I'm just learning this myself, Mark, according to all the scholars today, was the first book. And Matthew copied from Mark. Luke also copied from Mark. And they edited, okay? So Mark came first, Matthew, and then Luke, and then John was just a latecomer. Mark wrote 40 years after Christ. And it wasn't Mark, they used these names, but whoever the author of the book of Mark, he was the first. That was the first of the Gospels. And Paul wrote before any of them. He was the first. This is acquired by way of logic. It's just logic. It wasn't magic. It was logic. They can look at arguments and look at facts and look at alterations and see why, this was never mentioned until later, so Mark was the first, and, we know this now. Have you ever seen the logical fallacies? You've heard of a lot of them. Cognitive dissonance, that's one. A straw man argument, that's another. Lack of evidence doesn't prove lack of existence. There's a whole list of them, and this list is, the oldest are, 2,500 years old, okay? Logic is not a new thing. And it's strange that I see that people don't practice logic. They don't work on their thinking ability. And conversations will be convoluted sometimes where a person can't seem to articulate why he's saying what he's saying. They don't seem to have the ability for clarity. And that's because lack of practice. Writing is a huge benefit for someone practicing logic. Just write an essay. So I'm wondering, what do you guys think? You think maybe it's a little too cold for painting right now? I don't know. Just possibly. And then share that essay with people, have an audience. Do they get what you're saying? Do they find it interesting, or does it fall flat on its face? If you don't succeed when you share your writing, okay, that's a lesson to be learned. You can learn from that. You might even ask people questions, interview them after you show them what you wrote. See how close you got to your mark. Because what I see in this lack of clarity is that people are oblivious to the problem. They can't articulate their clarity, and then they don't even know that they can't articulate their clarity. There's a saying about this. I can't think of how it goes. But you know, the more you learn that you don't know. You know, this is another thing. In fact, it's not a separate subject. It's exactly the same subject, because the people with a lack of clarity, they don't even know enough to know that they can actually articulate with skill after they've attained some practice. The saying is from a physicist, Wheeler, John Wheeler. He said, "My knowledge is like an island with ever expanding shorelines, and my ignorance is the shoreline, also ever expanding." The more you learn, the more you become aware of what you don't know. The word for refusing to be certain is agnostic. Socrates made the preeminent statement of agnosticism.